Today I'm going to be doing my Big Ten power ranking. This is kind of the middle period between week 0, which had a lot of exhibition play for all the Big Ten teams, and the week 1 of non-conference play. I'm not sure how often I will be doing these, probably every couple of weeks at least. There are a lot of fairly new coaches and turnover in this league, so I do think I have a good read, but it's going to be kind of a mix of recency basing on like recent results as well as just what I know about each team and how I feel they're doing. So I do think I have a pretty strong read to do what is basically a preseason power ranking, even though college hockey started. It's still kind of the preseason, and then I'll definitely be doing one just before Big Ten play starts in early November. This is just a way to see how things change from the start. We'll see how things move around. At 7, I've got Michigan State. There are 7 teams in this league. Danton Cole is one of the newer coaches in the conference. I think he is in a tough spot. Michigan State is a program with a lot of potential, great athletic program, a lot of resources, but the hockey team has been mired in mediocrity, and I consider this basically the toughest job in the toughest conference in college hockey. That said, I think this team is one of the best, likely last place teams in any conference. Defense is deceptively good, guys who can move the puck, guys who can defend pretty well. They did lose a pretty good player in Zach Osborne, but overall, basically everyone is back. Up front, they do have some star power: Patrick Kodorenko, goal scorer, playmaker, Mitchell Lewandowski, same thing basically. They've both been around the block. They were on the infamous KHL line, centered by Taro Hirose. It will be interesting to see if they can resist regression statistically. After losing an NHL caliber center to pro hockey, Taro Hirose was the Big Ten Player of the Year, and he would have been really big time if he came back this season. So he was really the kind of the straw that stirred the drink on that group, and we're just going to see how things go. But that's a big reason why I think this team is decidedly 7th place, is they lost him, and there's no way to replace that. The freshman class isn't star-studded, it's pretty small. But I think the forward group overall, it's low-key, kind of deep. It's not like nobody screams at you like this guy's going to take over, but past those 2 forwards, there are some other good players. Sam Saliba, captain, pretty good player. There are some other players here, not at super high end, but some solid college hockey players that they return a lot of. In net, 2 guys returned, John Letherman and Drew DeRitter. Both of them saw time. As returners, you want to see a step forward from them. Neither of them is going to have a crazy workload. I think if they stay healthy, this team has enough scoring, enough age, enough size, enough experience, and they don't have many expectations. So I think that they can play spoiler at least for some of the other teams and be surprisingly competitive. So that's kind of the path to success. Again, the loss of Taro Hirose, nobody big time as far as the freshman class coming in. That's kind of bad news. So yeah, this was already a last place team last year. At least on paper, this team's going to have a hard time moving forward. One factor that I think is huge, I've kind of alluded to, last year having the top line of the conference, that made this team a threat in basically every game. This year, I don't think they're going to get that much respect. So they do have some real players, and other teams are going to potentially write this team off, and they can use that to their advantage. So we'll see. They've got Northern Michigan coming up this weekend, and I'm looking forward to see how the Spartans do this season. At 6, I got the University of Minnesota, Golden Gophers. 6 out of 7. I did have them 5th going into this past weekend, the exhibitions. I was really underwhelmed by their tie against the University of Mount Royal. I was hoping to see the freshmen just kind of jump right in. And I did think the freshmen did pretty well, but the team as a whole didn't look too great. Playing at home, it really looked like the first game of the season for them, and in this conference, they are going to have to be better than that. They are going to have to look a lot sharper, transitioning better, managing the puck better. They threw away a lot more pucks than you would want. They weren't looking super dynamic, except for a couple guys that I'll get into soon. They've got a ton of freshmen this year, so I find it hard to say that they're going to be one of the top teams in this conference. On the other side of things, Michigan did really well in their exhibition. Again, it is just an exhibition, but this is a power ranking. So I had to kind of think about that. I think they've addressed some big losses. They lost a big-time goaltender. They've got a lot of goaltenders coming in. I think they're going to be fine in that regard. The defense, I think, is actually probably going to be better this season, even though they're pretty young. They've got a couple 18-year-olds coming in. Both those guys were top draft guys. Ben Brinkman, I thought, was great as an 18-year-old. He got drafted as well. He's back, obviously. Some of the new forwards, Bryce Brodzinski, Ben Myers, I think they could do some damage as the year goes on. But I feel like this is kind of a rebuilding year for them. The only way I see this team contending is if the secondary scoring suddenly comes together. This top line, which looks like Sammy Walker, Blake McLaughlin, and Bryce Brodzinski, can't take a night off. To be fair, I thought Walker scored a great goal. McLaughlin passing was awesome. He also scored a goal, but I thought he looked really great in that exhibition game. And so that's kind of the path, I think, into the top 3 or 4 is the new guys really play well, and the sophomores, Walker, McLaughlin, also really play well. And they get goaltending and kind of manage the puck well, take advantage of their big sheet when they're playing at home, play well on the road, take care of business. This team could do well. But I do think that they're going to struggle a bit. It's natural. They've got so many new players coming in. But I do think they're extremely well positioned for the future. I also don't think they looked great in overtime against Mount Royal. Again, I know Mount Royal's played a bunch of games, and it was just an exhibition. But the fact that they barely got out of that game with a tie at home, it isn't a great look. So they have a good test at Colorado College this weekend in Colorado Springs. We'll see how that goes and reevaluate in a couple of weeks. At 5, we've got University of Michigan. The Wolverines get the nod at 5 because mostly Minnesota moved down a bit. I thought that the exhibition against Windsor was pretty good. You wanted to see the freshmen jump right in, and that's what you saw. Cam York scored an absolutely highlight reel, potentially the goal of the year in an exhibition game. He looked like somebody who's going to be able to fill the skates that Quinn Hughes has left behind. He might even be a better college player at the end of the day. John Beecher, I think he's got a crazy upside, maybe a bigger upside in pro hockey, but I think he should be a great college player too. He should be able to play either forward position for them, and we'll see how that goes. They bring in some other players. Emil Orval, he was a big-time scorer in the USHL. Returning Will Lockwood, Jake Slaker, Passagov brothers. They were getting some good secondary scoring down the stretch at the end of the year last year. Defensively, it's decent. They lost, obviously, Quinn Hughes and Joe Ciccone. That's like as good as it gets. They also lost a big-time center in Josh Norris. Those guys are all at least in the AHL this year. Quinn Hughes just scored his first goal of the NHL season last night. I don't know. I just think Michigan, it's hard to say that they're going to be higher than 5 in the early days. I definitely could see this team doing really well. I think that they kind of have underachieved, so it's hard to give them credit on the past. We'll see how it goes. I do think goaltending is an area of concern. They've got a great guy playing in the USHL this year, but that's obviously no solace this season. So we'll see how things go against real NCAA teams in out-of-conference play this month. They play Clarkson, who are ranked 11th at home this weekend. That's twice. And that's a big test to start the year. If they split that series, I think you take that, be happy about it. I wouldn't be surprised to see them come out 0-2, get some losses out of the way to start the year early, and I think they could still come on strong. At number 4, I've got the University of Wisconsin Badgers. This was a tricky spot. Just like Michigan, who load up on new talent, I find it hard to put Wisconsin into the upper echelon of this ranking until they've played a couple more games. They do have a chance to take off and definitely could be the biggest riser. Many of the people I've spoken to think that Wisconsin could be the top team in this conference, which I think is interesting. I wonder how many games they watched last year. I watched a fair amount of their games last season. I think I have a pretty strong read on what they bring back. Keandre Miller, first-round pick on defense, was an impact player as a freshman. Wyatt Kalynuk, one of the best defensemen in the conference. They've got a core rounded out with sophomore Ty Emberson. He's really good too. Josh S., Tyler Inamoto, very nice players on defense as well. They all serve a role. They all kind of have their place in this team. They're going to all have shots at pro hockey if they want it. Finnish sophomore goaltender Dan Lebedev, was a workhorse, 10 to goal last year as a freshman. Now is definitely a good time for him to take a big step forward if this team wants to have success. The freshman class, obviously, anyone who's following college hockey or prospects knows about this. Alex Turcotte, 5th overall. Cole Caulfield, 15th overall to the Habs. And then they got a potential lottery pick in Dylan Holloway coming in. That's awesome. I mean, we'll see how they do. I think the sky's the limit as far as those guys go. I really like a few of the players they return up front. There isn't any big high end here, but Sean Doogie is as good as it gets as far as college players go. Linus Weissbach can make a lot happen offensively. There is plenty of depth. You've got decent players, Tariq Baker, Oshin, a bunch of other guys. The transfer of Ty Pelton-Bice, who played for Harvard, I think that's next factor. This team wants experience, size, offensive ability. It's exactly what he can bring, and they can really put it to good use if they look like they're going to make a run. So I think this is probably the team to watch in this conference. And so having them 4th, which is in the bottom half, it's hard. It's just once I get into the upper 3 teams, you'll see why. But don't be surprised if they end up ranked 1st the next time I do this. I just kind of wanted to be conservative before they've played any NCAA games. The Badgers open their season with a big test tonight against Boston College. Boston College with Spencer Knight in net, top-tier freshman class with 3 first-rounders, plenty of others who will be a great test. These are 2 programs that are going to be looking for a lot out of their freshman classes early on. Then Saturday night, kind of similar, they head to Merrimack, who are rebuilding, but they have a ton of freshmen on their own as well. I think it is very possible the Badgers can 2-0. They also could go 0-2. It's a good set of tests against 2 hungry teams to start the non-conference slate, so those will be worth watching. At number 3, I've got Ohio State. I thought last year was the year for the Buckeyes to make a title run. They had steadily improved their position in the standings over Coach Steve Rolick's tenure, and then they ended up sputtering down the stretch, which is a confluence of a couple of different factors I'm not going to get into right now. But I have enough respect for this team and the staff. I don't think they're going to totally fall off this year. That said, I could see why they might, even though I have them at 3rd. They lost some of the best players in the conference. Mason Jobst, Dakota Joshua up front, among a couple other guys who had contributions in that class. Sasha LaRock, big-time piece on defense. Sean Romeo in the net. All of those losses are going to be felt for different reasons. They do bring back a good amount. They were a deep team. Tanner Lazinski is back. That's huge. Carson Meyer, Ronnie Hine is back as captain. Meanwhile, Gustav Westland is totally primed to break out. Tommy Napier, goaltender, is going to have a much heavier workload this season. He split games last year and he looked awesome. But I think he could be ready for it. I think they need all their guys to stay healthy and bring it every night if they're going to be competitive in this conference. They also have a solid recruiting class. 2 of the stars are Leighton Ahak. He had a great end to his career in the British Columbia circuit, capped off with a 3rd-round selection this summer by Vegas. And then Michael Gilden, undrafted, one of the only players not drafted from the NTDP. He probably has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, but even if he doesn't, he's a nice piece to add up front. Add some size, scoring ability. Should definitely be a good player for them down the line, if not this year. So yeah, I think there was enough in the depth of this roster. There's some other players like Quinn Preston, who I'm looking forward to see how they step forward. Matt Miller on defense. There's a bunch of different guys on this team. This team was the best team in the conference last year, at least in the regular season. So there's a lot to watch here. I hope that they don't take a huge step back, but it's on them to show and prove. So that's Ohio State, number 3. They're going to open their season at the Icebreaker Tournament. It's in Toledo, Ohio this year, hosted by Bowling Green. They play Western Michigan Friday night, and then Saturday night they play the hosts, Bowling Green. The other team in the tournament is RIT, who they won't play. I think those are 2 really tough matchups. We'll learn a lot about how the Buckeyes do. If they 2-0, that's an amazing start. I think they'll be happy to split, but look for the 2-0. At number 2, I have the University of Notre Dame. The Fighting Irish are an interesting team. I could see the argument for them to be anywhere between 4th and 1st, but I definitely lean towards the teams that return a lot and have a strong identity. I think that's Notre Dame for sure. I think they're definitely in the top 2 to start the year. They have the most experienced head coach in the conference, with Jeff Jackson. He's in his 15th year. They have a great staff who keeps the team stocked with talent, and they, like I said, they have their clear identity, hard to play against. They stay on top of the puck, hard to score on. The one downside of how they play is that they don't really have a ton of offensive fireworks. They lose a guy who made a lot happen last year in defenseman Bobby Nardella. That was a really important piece of their offensive dynamic. While the other blue liner, Andrew Peak, that they lost, that's a huge loss as well. Just big, hard to play against, and he put up numbers. Dylan Malmquist also put up great numbers as a forward. They're going to have to find a way to replace that production. They do have the players who can do it. A lot of players. Michael Graham, Cal Burke, Michael O'Leary, Cam Morrison, Colin Thiessen, even Graham Saggart, Jake Pavanka. Incoming freshman Trevor Janicki should be another solid player. They also play a system where they really don't need a ton of scoring. They're going to get their goals, and they're going to keep you to a low amount of goals for the most part. On defense, Matt Hellickson is a great piece. Same thing, Torridello. I think the younger players like Spencer Stastny and Nick Lieberman can really start to step up in the wake of losing Nardella and Peak. Of course, the goaltending is the major reason why this team could really run away with the conference. Both of the goaltenders had great numbers, but Cale Morris is the big piece in that. He had a over 930 save percentage with well over 30 games played. Dylan St. Cyr was really strong in a backup role. In general, there's a lot to be excited about when it comes to Fighting Irish hockey. I think this team could definitely make a title run. They won a game in the NCAAs last year, and they lost to UMass, who ended up going to the final. And it was just a tough matchup for them. So we'll see. They play Air Force. The service academies are never an easy out in any sport. In hockey, they're definitely often well-conditioned, play hard. So I think it's an interesting matchup. I do think it's possible that Notre Dame 2-0s because I think they're one of the better teams. But this is a great way for them to start the season. I wouldn't be surprised if they split. At number 1, I have Penn State. The Nittany Lions, like the Irish, they very much have their own identity, despite being a much newer hockey program in Division I. They skate pretty well. They push the pace on other teams, and they basically ask questions later. They had the best offense in the country, one of the worst defenses in the country. Goaltending can look like a question mark, but while I think tending the net for Notre Dame is probably pretty easy, it has to be a pretty big challenge to be the goaltender for a team like this where they're just flying all the time, and they do surrender some opportunities for sure. Question for Penn State is whether they can outscore teams enough to cement their place at the top, get to the tournament hot, make a run there. After that, anything could happen. The reason why I have them at number 1 is I'm really heavily weighting it on what they bring back and how much turnover and how many things need to be figured out. I think basically they lost almost nothing. Chase Berger was a great player for them. That's about it. I mean, I don't want to disrespect anybody, but that was really the big piece that they lost. They return so many core pieces up front and on defense. The freshman class brings in another guy who can skate and score in Kevin Ball. Connor McEachern had great numbers for Youngstown in the USHL last year. I don't know if those guys can figure anywhere near the top 6 as freshmen. This team has a bottom 6 most teams would love to have. Arni Talvidia, Finnish player, is a player to watch beyond potential Hobie favorite Evan Barrett. Talvidia missed the second half last season after getting hurt, captaining the Finns in the gold medal game of the World Juniors. He's probably going to be playing center this year. He was one of the best players for them last year in the first half. Junior defenseman Clayton Phillips, transferring in from Minnesota, is looking for a fresh start. He got an NCAA exemption, so he's going to play right away. He fits well into that system as far as a skater who can really move the puck. I think he's definitely a good add for them. I mean, it's hard to see how he's going to fit in immediately, but either way, you add in a skater with some experience, I don't see how it hurts the team. In general, I think this is just going to be an extremely dangerous team, whether or not they're the best team in the conference. But I do think it's very likely, and it's pretty impressive what the staff has been able to build. It's, this is one of the hardest conferences in college hockey. I think it's probably the hardest. Penn State opens at home with 2 games against Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart tied UConn last weekend, and they won an exhibition against Canadian University Simon Fraser, 6-1. I do think with Penn State as the top team in this ranking, they should be able to come away with a sweep. First game could even be kind of a point night Game 2, I could see it being closer. It's an afternoon game, less turnover. It's usually tough to really put a team away on that second night. Expectations are pretty high for the Nittany Lions, and rightly so. Like I said, there's not much turnover to point to as an excuse early on. Everyone looks to be healthy. They already won their exhibition game last weekend, 5-0. So I think let's see them do some damage. And that does it for the first Big Ten Power Rankings. The future rankings will be more focused on recent results and body of work since games will actually have been played. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to doing more.